that insight. Now we move on to our next news. To Middle East, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar is on his first visit to India, becoming the 5th Israeli minister to travel to the country this year. Gideon's visit focuses on the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, which was initially proposed in September of 2023 at the G20 Leaders Summit in New Delhi. The IMEC aims to develop a clean hydrogen pipeline, an electricity link, a high-speed undersea digital cable, and to integrate existing infrastructure, including ports. Gideon Sa'ar, in a meeting with Indian External Minister, discussed about their fight against terrorism, including the need for a zero-tolerance approach towards the menace from the world's community and ways to ramp up cooperation in trade, infrastructure, and regional connectivity through projects such as the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. Sa'ar has described the radical terror as the threat to both sides and reiterated Israel's condemnation of the terror attack in Pahalgam back in April this year. Let's listen into what Israeli minister has said.
Our goal is to build a long-term strategic partnership between Israel and India. Your Excellency, radical terror is a mutual threat to Israel and India. We strongly condemn the horrific terror attack in Pahalgam. In the Middle East, Israel faces a unique phenomenon which I call terror states. The radical terror states of Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Houthis in Yemen have established themselves over the past decades. Uprooting them is necessary for the security and stability of our region.
Meanwhile, Jai Shankar has noted that India and Israel have a strategic partnership with a real meaning and said the two sides have stood together in testing times and created a relationship with high degree of trust and reliability. Let's listen into what Indian minister has said.
Our two nations face a particular challenge from terrorism. It is essential that we work towards ensuring a global approach of zero tolerance towards terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. We have naturally been following developments in your region with very close attention. We welcome the return of the hostages and the remains of those who unfortunately lost their lives. India supports the Gaza peace plan and hopes that it paves the way for a durable and lasting solution.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Shruti, for joining us again. Good to see you. Shruti, now looking at Israel and India's relations, what does Israel have to offer India? As we know, India is a bigger country with more population, more resources, more history, and it has much more to offer. So what does Israel have?
Well, Israel is very key to India's IMEC plans, as you have discussed earlier in your reports. India as a nation plan to go through UAE, from our Mumbai port towards UAE, Saudi Arabia, and from Israel, then into Greece, and from Greece to the rest of the Eastern Europe. So it's a longer journey in this where Israel is key because we're using their ports, Haifa and such. But beyond that, India and Israel are two nations that face Islamic terrorism head on. They are both victims of Islamic terrorism, religious terrorism as such. And this is something which they experienced on October 7th and India experienced in Pahalgam. So there is a sympathy factor as well as global voice for nations that are not on either side of the conversation and are just suffering due to radical ideologies being supported by certain groups. So this is the second part of the conversation that is there. India, of course, is a superpower that Gideon Sa'ar himself has stated, or at least is on its way to becoming one. It is the largest democracy and it is the most powerful economy in the world as of now, thanks to the lovely figures that we've been seeing. So everybody wants a piece of the pie, everybody wants in on the game. What Israel has to give us on the other side is support on things that we need to ensure peace throughout India when we are negotiating with nations that have hardline Islamic groups. So when we have Israel's backing, we don't stand alone in the conversation regarding anti-terrorism. The second part is that Israel has very strong lobbying in USA. So if we are good friends with Israel, India has access to that particular lobby as well via Israel. So that's the second part. And the third part is Israel is really, really good with technology specifically. So defense tech included. Although there were, during Pahalgam, there were reports that some Israeli companies were hired to have an attack, a cyber attack on Indian companies and government websites, which was neatly foiled. So there is that particular element as well, that if we are on good terms with Israel, then there is a chance that the government of Israel would ensure that such attacks, which can be bought from any particular nation, because it's a private company that would be hacking such things. So that particular element is no longer working towards an anti-India program as such. So in the larger scale of things, it may seem that Israel is just one tiny nation, but for our interpersonal relationship, right from IMEC to anti-terrorism, Israel is a partner that India looks forward to having for bigger conversations with the world.
And building on that, as you have also touched, but what challenges might India face in balancing its deepening ties with Israel alongside its relationship with Arab nations such as UAE, Saudi Arabia?
Well, that's a very valid point, Asuma, that you have brought up.
Thank you.
Israel is unable to kind of have good relationships with its neighbors, which in the Arab world, most of these nations do not even recognize Israel as a country, independent nation, and they have their own radical groups trying to overthrow the Jews out from that region and control the narrative of that particular place. So, on a whole, Israel has a larger number of enemies in its near neighbors, and it might seem that any friendship with Israel would make India exact enemies with people who oppose the idea of Israel or even its existence. But fortunately for us, we have good relations with both Qatar as well as Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is actively working with India to ensure that there is a moderate Islam that is being propagated throughout the world on its own and in India as well. And Saudi Arabia is also part of the IMEC deal, so is UAE. So these two nations, which are the pillars of the Arab world, stand with India, and they do not mind cooperating with India as well as Israel for the IMEC deal, because they know this is where the progress of the world as well as the trade of the world is going to flow through. So this is where the money is, and hence they are ready to work with India while partnering with Israel on the IMEC deal. So although it looks bad because Israel has a large number of people opposing it, large number of nations condemning its actions in Gaza, but it has its own place in the world, and India is trying to find the middle ground, whereas we do not support one way or the other genocide of either the Jews or these Arabs in Gaza. We're trying to find the middle peace ground and ensure that progress happens everywhere, while radical ideology of any kind is suppressed and controlled.
Thank you for sharing that. And Shruti, lastly, bringing China into this conversation, how do you think China will look at this India and Israel relations becoming deeper, and how does this IMEC initiative reflect broader geopolitical competition with China's Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, the IMEC is a faster route, I believe, and it of course is not tethered in the debt loan trap, which is the home ground for China and its BRI initiatives. China tends to exploit the nations that it kind of finds itself in partnership with in BRI. The prime example of it being the CPEC in Pakistan itself, and BRI on its own has found itself at a block because of the internal politics of Pakistan and their interpersonal relations with China not being that good anymore, because Pakistan has gone and made very deep friends with China's ideological enemy as well as economic enemy, that is USA. So there is a kind of stagnation in relationships between the partners of BRI, So India has been working towards the IMEC as well as other routes for trade that does not restrict itself precisely on the existence of either China or Pakistan or its enemies. India as a whole wants to be part of the global conversation on trade and manufacturing, and its government and other agencies are working towards it. We have Indian diaspora in various regions, right from South America to America, as well as your Arab world and Africa. So we've been making deals across the world to ensure that trade that benefits all our partners, not just India, but anybody, any nation that is partnering with India would find itself on the path of progress. And that is something which makes India's IMEC and other initiatives different than what China and its BRI initiative is. So China might be looking to find its way out of the debt traps that it has laid and now is bringing its own economic downfall, while India is just looking for good, decent partnerships and a continuation of the trade relationship that it has built over the years.
Thank you very much for that thorough explanation and sharing that insight. As always, great learning from you, Shruti Das Gupta. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Asia. As per reports, North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un is willing to meet US President Donald Trump. This comes after Trump made comments during his 5-day Asia tour that he was willing to meet Kim Jong-un while departing his Asia tour. Trump has also said that he would return to the region to meet the North Korean Supreme Leader. Both leaders previously met back in 2018 in Singapore, and Trump has praised their relationship, saying that they get along very well. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Georgi Toleraya. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Moscow. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Professor, what could a renewed meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un mean for U.S.-North Korea relations? And do you think could U.S. push North Korea to tangible progress on denuclearization?
Well, I've been watching North Korean and U.S. relations for almost 5 decades now. I've served in North Korea and been there many times. The last time was last August. I knew, by the way, well, Kim Yong-nam, former foreign minister who died today, so condolences to his family and friends. And this story about Kim Jong-un meeting Trump is not a new one. Even before Donald Trump came to power again, he reminded of his contacts with Kim Jong-un, and he said he would like to meet and to discuss things, to continue dialogue. Let me remind that, however, that Kim Jong-un was not happy with the last meetings he had with Donald Trump, because he suggested a very good deal in his opinion. He suggested to close down the nuclear center in Nuremberg in exchange for the lifting of just a number of sanctions, not all of them, but a number of most harmful sanctions for the humanitarian situation in the country. But Donald Trump flat refused, pressed by his former assistant John Bolton and Michael Pompeo. It was a huge setback, and after that, Kim Jong-un lost his faith in diplomacy, especially with dealings with the United States or their leaders. So he was very much disappointed and offended, in fact. However, since Donald Trump came to power, he several times reminded that he would like to meet Kim Jong-un. And these talks have already been quite active before his coming to Asia. Donald Trump gave some signals that he would like to meet, that he may stay in South Korea and travel to the North Korea or to the border, to the demarcation line between the two countries to meet Kim Jong-un. However, he received no response because Kim Jong-un and in general, the North Korean government, they see very little reason for talking with the Americans and Donald Trump. Although Kim Jong-un has specifically mentioned that he well remembers his meetings with Donald Trump, and personally he is quite fond of him, but that doesn't mean that it can be translated into better relations between the countries. Kim Jong-un separated these two issues. And also his sister said that the condition for talking with the Americans would be recognition of North Korean nuclear status. He's not going to discuss denuclearization in any form again. It's already in the DPRK constitution, and North Koreans made it quite clear that they're not going to discuss denuclearization at all. Looks like the US is considering this option, although before the denuclearization and the removing this threat to global non-proliferation was the alpha and omega of their policy towards North Korea. And this is exactly the factor that has prevented US normalizing relations with North Korea for more than 30 years. After 1994, then they reached tentative agreement on the deal. But recently, Donald Trump is giving some signals that he understands that North Korea is not going to get away from its nuclear weapons. Just before his visit to Asia, he said that North Korea is a kind of nuclear power, and he mentioned that they have nuclear status. So that gives room for a meeting. That gives rooms for the dialogue. Although the problem is for Kim Jong-un that he is not going to give any concessions because he is in a much stronger position now. He now has his nuclear deterrent. He's got his economy developing better than before. He got the very good alliance with Russia, which supports him, and there's lots of cooperation going on. He improved his relation with China, and China is also helping North Korea a lot. He ignores South Korea, and he said he doesn't need any contact with South Korea. So US has something to offer to him, and so far we don't see what US can offer to North Korea. As far as I know, there has not been any just, reparation for what would be US position in Washington.
Yes.
And North Koreans just cannot expect much from this meeting. So the problem is not the meeting itself, but what will be the contents.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Professor Georgi Tolaraya for joining us and staying with us, also sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move on to our next news. The Chinese and Dutch government is at loggerheads over the Nexperia issue. In recent developments, China has accused the Netherlands of not showing a constructive attitude or taking concrete actions to resolve the dispute surrounding the Dutch government's seizure of the chip maker Nexperia. Earlier on September 30th, the Dutch government took control of Nexperia, which is owned by Chinese parent company Wingtech, citing national security concerns and worries about potential technology transfers to China. The Dutch government is also removed the Chinese CEO. Responding to that, China's Commerce Ministry has called the Dutch action improper interference in internal corporate affairs and a violation of the Chinese company's legitimate rights. However, the diplomatic reach-out were made between both governments to resolve this issue. The spokesperson for Dutch Economic Affairs Ministry have issued a statement saying that talks were still underway between both the governments. The standoff between has led to a major chip shortage, threatening to halt European automotive assembly lines, and has highlighted global concerns over semiconductor supply chain stability and geopolitical tensions. Now we move on to our next news. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning has issued a statement on the earthquake in Afghanistan. The statement has informed that China is closely monitoring the earthquake situation in Afghanistan. The ministry has also stated that China is ready to provide assistance according to Afghanistan's needs. The Foreign Ministry has expressed its condolences to the victims. Earlier, a 6.3 magnitude earthquake struck near the northern Afghan city of Mazar-e-Sharif, killing 20 people and injuring hundreds. The Chinese government has maintained continued engagement with the Taliban government and has been pushing for closer ties with Kabul. China also provided assistance during the earthquake earlier this year that has killed more than 2,200 people in Afghanistan. Let's listen into what the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson has said.
中方也在密切关注阿富汗的地震灾情。 我们对遇难者表示深切哀悼，向遇难者家属和受伤人员表示诚挚慰问。我们相信，在阿富汗政府的领导下，阿富汗人民一定能够战胜灾害，重建家园。那么，中方也愿意根据阿富汗的需要提供帮助。
That's all we have time for. Keep watching News.